Okay, hello everyone. I wanted to make this quick video on how to use Adobe Illustrator to create some simple interiors because I know a lot of people in the group are getting pretty excited and anxious about wanting to create custom interiors, and we still have a few days to wait before that gets covered within the challenge in some detail. So I'm just going to create a simple page here today. I'm not going to do anything terribly complicated. I'll show you how to make some horizontal lines, some vertical lines, how to space them, and then maybe how to embellish a page a little bit. It's not so much about what I create today as it is about the tools that I show you, and once you learn those simple tools, you can use them to create any custom interior that you want. So first of all, if you use Adobe Illustrator, you'll notice that my workspace probably looks very different from yours. I have all these extra panels and tools. I've customized my workspace to fit the way I work with KDP, and particularly for the way I work in creating coloring books. So if there's anything I show you today where you can't find the tool or the panel that I'm referencing, you can find everything under Window, if it's a panel. Or you can come down here to these three dotted lines under your toolbar, and you'll find more tools underneath there that you can look for. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my line segment tool, which you see here. I'm going to create some lines. Now, if I wanted, I could come over here and just start drawing lines, right? They'll just appear wherever I draw them. But I want to do this with a little bit more precision, so I'm going to undo that. Control Z is undo. That's Command Z if you're on a Mac, and Control Z, Command Z is your best friend. Okay. So remember that anything you do that you don't like the result of, you hit Control Z and it goes away. So I'm going to go ahead and instead of drawing a line, I'm just going to click anywhere on my workspace over here on my document, and I'll get this window that gets pulled up. I'm working on a 6x9 page, by the way, and it's going to be for a bleed, so I've added the necessary 0.25 to the height and the 0.125 to the width for that bleed trim. So I'm going to want my line to go all the way across this page, so for length I'm actually going to go ahead and put in 6.125. And then the angle, I'm not sure how it populates this, but that's kind of a random number, so I'm just going to go and hit 0. I think it populates it with the last line that I created. So when I hit OK, you'll notice I have this line on my workspace now. Now I can go and use the arrows on my keyboard to move it around. It's kind of slow going because it's a large document. And you can go side to side or up and down. Or I can just select it with my selection tool and drag it around where I want it. But I want to be a little more precise, so I'm actually going to open up this transform panel that you see here. And this is great because it allows you to input the numbers of where you want things and the size you want things. So here we have the X and Y values, which is where your object is located, and then you have the width and height of your object. And this is very important. Over here you can see what your reference point is for these numbers, right? You have this little grid here. I'd like to work from the top left corner, so I'm going to click on that top left corner. So now every number I input into these fields will be relative to this top left corner of my document. To show you what I mean, on X, I want it to start at the very beginning, the left-hand side of the page. So for X, I'm going to put 0. And when I hit Tab, you'll see that it goes right to the left end of my document. For Y, I think I want it about 1 inch from the top, so I'm going to put 1 inch, right? And it's in reference to that top left corner. And when I hit Enter, you'll see it moved my line to the top. Okay, so within Illustrator, there's maybe 100 different ways to do everything. So I'm going to show you kind of the way I've streamlined it, the easiest method that I've found to do some of these things. So while I already have this line selected, I could go and do Control C, which is copy, and then Control V, which is paste, and then go through the whole transform process again to get the line where I want. But I've found a little shortcut here. If you go up to Object, while your object is selected, and if I go to Transform, Move, here it has how much you want to move it horizontally and vertically. I don't want to move it horizontally because I want it to stay in place horizontally. Vertically, I think I want my spacing for this to be at, let's say it's a 6x9 journal, let's say 0.25, which is close to like a college rule. So I'm going to hit Tab again, and you see the, let me see, whoops, that's supposed to be 0. And 0.25, so you see the distance is moving, is 0.25 inches. The angle is -90 because it's going straight down. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit preview, and you'll see that line move, so you can see how far it's going to move on your page. But I don't want the line to actually move. I want it copied. So instead of hitting OK, I'm going to hit copy, and it will create a new line for me, 0.25 inches below my original line. Now here's another great trick. Your other best friend in Adobe Illustrator is Control D, which basically, I don't know what it actually stands for, but I think of it as do again. So any transformation that I do, I can repeat by hitting Control D. So I just copied that line and moved it 0.25 inches. So if I hit Control D over and over again, it's just going to populate my document with these lines at the same distance. And I'll stop right there. So there's a basic lined page. So I'm going to add a couple of little embellishments here to try and maybe make it look like, you know, the line notebooks that you would use in school. So I'm going to add a vertical line first of all. So I'll go back to my line segment tool. This time I'm not going to click on a spot, and I don't want that window popping up. This time I'm going to go ahead and draw the line. So I'm just going to kind of estimate where I want it. I'll start it at the top, and I'll start drawing. Now you want it to be a vertical line. So, you know, if you're having trouble keeping a vertical line, you know, I'll put it off, you know, off axis here, and you'll see that when I hit the Shift key, it goes completely vertical. So there's with Shift, there's without. So just hold Shift, and you'll create a completely vertical line. And so there's my line. Now, it looks pretty close, but it does go extend off of the page here, so which shouldn't be a big deal, but I like to keep things nice and tidy within my document. So I'm going to go back to the transform panel while it's still selected, and so for X, you can see it's at 1.0952 inches. That's the distance from the left edge to my object, and I actually want that to be 1 inch. So I'm going to put 1.25. I'm sorry, let's see. I'm going to do 1.0625 to accommodate for that bleed trim. So 1.0625, which is half of the amount that I added for the bleed. Then I'll hit Tab, and you'll see it move slightly. And for Y, I'm going to put it at 0 because I want it to start at the very top. Okay, and then for height, width is 0 because it's just a vertical line. For height, I want it to be the entire height of my document, which I know is 9.25. So when I hit enter, you should see the line is now perfectly in place here. I'm going to hit Control minus to zoom out just a little bit. Whoops, too much. So Control plus is to zoom in, Control minus is to zoom out, and then if I hold my space bar, my cursor turns into the hand, and I can kind of drag it around where I want it, just so you have a comfortable workspace to work in. Now I'm going to want to create an identical line on this side to sort of mimic that line that you would see in your notebook paper that's printed on the other side of your document. So while this line is already selected, I'm just going to copy it, right? So I'll hit Control C, which is copy. Now I'm going to hit Control Shift V. And Control Shift V is paste in place, which means, you know, you can't see it on my document, but it just created a copy of itself right on top of itself in place. So and the one that I just created on top is now the one that is selected. So I'm going to go over here to my transform panel while it's still selected, and I'm going to move this to the right where I want it. Now you have to figure out the math. So it's 6 inches plus that 0.125 that we added for the bleed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to subtract. I'm going to take 6.0625, and I'm going to hit minus 1 inch. And then when I hit enter, Adobe Illustrator is actually going to do that math for me. And you'll see, hopefully if I did this right, the line gets moved exactly where I want it on the right hand of the page. So now I want to make a couple of adjustments. So I'm gonna click on my selection tool and click off so you can see what our document looks like so far. Looks okay, but everything is very dark, everything is black, and every line weight is about the same, and I want to change that. So the first thing I'm going to do is, with my selection tool selected, I'm going to click on the first line, and I don't want anything to be black, so I'm going to go into stroke, which is the line color, the color of the line, and I'm going to click on a dark charcoal, not completely black, right? So it lightens just a bit. And I also want it to have a heavier weight than the other lines. So I'm going to click up on the stroke, which is the line width. And when I click away now, you'll see that that line is not black, it's a dark gray, but it's now thicker than the others. So now I'll go to this line, my left hand margin on my notebook paper. And I'm going to make the stroke, let's see, it's at 1 now. I'm going to make it, let's say, 1.75. So I'll highlight it and click 1.75 on my keyboard. And hit enter, and it's a little wider. And I also don't want it as dark as that top line. So I'm going to go back up here onto my grayscale. And I'll give it about, let's say, about that darkness. And I'll click away to see what that looks like. Maybe still a little too dark, so I'm going to change it again. Let's try that. There we go, and I like that. Now this margin on the right, if you recall, I'm trying to make it look like it's the line that's printed on the back of the page. So I'm going to make that very, very faint. So I'm going to highlight that, come up to the stroke, and I'm going to give it a very faint gray. Let's try this. Let's see what that looks like. And there we go. You might be able to make that a little lighter. I don't know. I kind of like it. So I'll leave that the way it is. The last thing I want to do is lighten some of these lines, or all of these lines in the middle. So what I'll do is I'll take my selection tool and I'm going to create a bounding box that touches all of the lines that I want to change. So now they all get selected. And I'm going to go ahead and give that about, let's say, this gray. And I might drop this down to 0.75, so it's kind of a finer line. And there we go. And I think I'm going to go ahead and either make this line a little darker or this one a little lighter. I think I'll make this one just a little bit darker so there's more of a difference between the two. Let's do something like that. Okay, so simple line notebook page. Actually, I think I'm going to lighten this one as well. Let's try that. We could also make it thinner if we wanted, but I like that. I like the way that looks. So a simple notebook page. I rarely do just a lined journal. I always like to embellish my pages, so I'm going to show you a couple of ways that you can do that. And it really brings a lot of viewer to the customer, these little customizations that you can do. So I happen to already have a lot of assets that I create that I save as symbols, and I definitely recommend doing that, because it gives you very, very easy access to a lot of the things that you create. So I'm going to open up this, let's see, let me close this, and I'm going to dock this here with my symbols. So when I click on it here, I have the symbols I've created. You can do this with any graphics that you have, or you can import any graphics or images that you have, but I'm going to do it this way. And I'm going to have some insects crawling around the page as if they're on the page itself. So let's try a couple of these. I think I'll take one of this guy and I'll just drag him into place. Let's take one of this guy, drag him into place, and then let's say I take one of these and drag him into place. Okay, so these are all things that I previously created in Illustrator. So with this guy highlighted, I'm going to hover over the corner here until I get that rotate symbol. I'm going to rotate it so it looks a little more natural. I also want to shrink him down. Now here's a cool trick. Once you have him in the place you want, first of all, you're going to, as you drag the corner to resize, you're going to want to hold shift so the proportions stay the same. But if you also hit Alt, the image will shrink and enlarge from the center and not from the corner. And you'll see what I mean here. As I drag, it sort of shrinks in place, right? It's not moving further away from the corner or closer to the corner. So I'll make it about that size. Another cool trick you can do is if you hold Alt while it's selected and then you click and drag, you actually make a copy. So then I'm going to go and shrink this one a little bit. So Alt and Shift again, and I'll just shrink him down just a bit. And then I'm going to make another copy of him, so I'll hold Alt and I'll drag somewhere. Okay, so now I'm going to take each of these and rotate the same way I did before, just to give a little variety and so it looks a little more naturalistic. Okay, and I'll sort of drag them closer together, further apart, depending on where I want them, how I want them looking on the page. And now I can start working on them together, transforming them together. So if I have one selected, I hold Shift, I can click on the rest, and now I can move them all together. Sorry, that was the wrong thing. Shift, select them all. I can use my arrow keys to move them around, or I can click on the center here and move them where I want them. I can shrink them all together. So again, I'm going to hold Alt and Shift and drag a corner. There, I think that size is a little better. And then I'll bring them down here into this corner. This guy, I'm going to make him a little bit smaller. Here, I won't hold Alt, I'll only hold Shift so you can see what I mean. This is going to resize from the corner, and you see it doesn't resize from the center. It resizes from the corner. But I'll move him up, and I'll rotate him a bit. Now hold on, I messed up here somewhere. I see a line missing. I didn't see where that happened, so you all see how I have a gap here. So very quickly, let me fix that. I'm going to highlight that line, and I'll do the same thing that I did before. I'll go to Object, Transform. I accidentally deleted it somewhere along the way. So horizontal, 0, I don't want it to move. Vertical, I want it to move 0.25. And then hit Tab, and then Preview. Yeah, it fills the spot I want it to, so I'm going to hit Copy. And so there my line has returned. And actually I just realized, I know what happened. This line up here is out of place as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen. Let's see. Actually, I should go to my Transform panel. And I'll put that at 0. And hit Enter. Same thing with this one that we copied. I want that at 0. Somewhere along the lines I shifted something or deleted something. And hit Enter. And there we go, it's fixed. So now let me take this guy and I'll resize him again. Hold Alt and Shift, and he shrinks from the center. Move him up a bit, rotate him. You got to be careful. Sometimes you accidentally grab the wrong object. So instead of grabbing that insect, I accidentally grabbed a line. Resize him again until he's looks how I want him to. I think I'm going to have this guy crawling downward on the page. So I'll get rotate, have him turn this way. I'm going to resize him. I'll make a copy of him, so remember Alt, click and drag. And then I want this one to be smaller. So Alt and Shift, shrink him down. I'll rotate him. Nope, I did it again. Control Z. Remember Control Z. You do something you don't like, hit Control Z. I'm going to rotate this again just a bit, and I'll move them into place. This time I'll use the arrows to kind of fine tune where this guy is at. Okay, and now I'll hold Shift, select them both, so I can move them around together. And I think, now remember this is going to be trimmed. I'm not really paying attention to the trim right now, but you'll want to space all your elements to where you know that some of this edge is going to be cut off going around this, okay? Normally I set up guides for myself, but I didn't do that for this tutorial. And so there we have a couple of embellishments, which you know, customers really, really appreciate. And the cool thing about using symbols is that, you know, I have 20 different insects here. If I wanted, you know, in just a few minutes, I could take this same page, copy it, and then add more insects, move these around. I mean, I could have 10 to 20 different pages for a journal in just a matter of minutes. So the last thing I think I'll show you here is I'm going to put a little section up here for the date. I've seen that in a lot of line journals. So I'm just going to come over here to my rectangle tool. And I'm not going to worry too much about where I start my rectangle, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I'm just going to click somewhere and drag. Once I get it about the size I want it, I'm going to hit spacebar. And once you hit spacebar, you can now move it around the page wherever you want. So I'm going to place it about right here, just a little place for the date. And there we go. It has a stroke of 0.75. I'm going to increase that. I want it to match that top dark line that I have, right? So I'll put the stroke at 2, and I'm going to make it nice and dark so it matches that other line. So let me click away and see what that looks like. Oops. Okay, so I like the placement, but you'll notice that my margin line is overlapping with that box. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this rectangle I just made, highlight it, select it. I've been working with the stroke so far in this video. This box next to it is the fill. So I'm actually going to fill that rectangle with white. And you'll see what happens is, since it's on the uppermost layer of my document, it covers everything that's underneath it. And so you'll see you don't have that line, that margin line, overlapping with it anymore. So there you have a nice little place for the date. Last thing I'll do, I'm going to give myself a couple of vertical lines so that you can actually have a place for the month, the day, and the year. And really I'm doing that just to show you another little tool here. I'm going to select that box. Down here you have a square and a circle overlapping, and this is the drawing modes. And you have normal, draw behind, and draw inside. I want to hit draw inside, and I'll show you why. When I come over here and select my line segment tool, you'll notice that I have dotted lines around that box now. Here, let me unclick so you can see. Those dotted line corners tell you that you're only drawing inside that box now. So what I'm going to do is, with my line segment tool, I'm going to create a line that obviously goes too far beyond the box there, and I'm going to hold shift down again so it's completely vertical, but I'm going to way overdo it just so you can see this. And if I click away, you'll see that you can only see it within that box. So I'm going to click it again, and actually sometimes when you're drawing, when you're working in that mode, it's hard to select just the line. So I'm going to come into my layers palette, panel, not palette, and I'm going to find that vertical line, which is here. I'll highlight it, and I'm going to use my arrow tool, my right arrow, to kind of put it where I want. And then the other thing I'll do while it's selected is I'm going to hit Control C to copy it, Control Shift V to paste it in place. So now there's two of them. And now when I use my arrow key, that second copy that I made is what gets moved. So I'll make this area a little wider for the year. And I'm just eyeballing this. Let's see. And there you have it. You know, a simple space to put the date. I'm going to go back to my drawing modes and switch back to draw normal, so that if I wanted to make any other changes here, I could simply go in there and just draw them the way I see fit. So I hope this was helpful to someone. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if you just have any general questions about Photoshop or Illustrator, I'm always happy to help you guys. So thank you for watching. Have a good day.